This is a speedrun of Left 4 Dead 2 main campaigns, any difficulty. Basically, that means you speedrun all of the main campaigns, which is Dead Center, Dark Carnival, The Parish, Swamp Fever, and Hard Rain in one sitting, and you could be on any difficulty. At the start of the run, we start on expert difficulty because we're going to be immediately massacring all of our friends. This is because bots in this game are extremely slow. They have some mechanics to make them catch up fast, but overall, it's worth it on solo to just kill them right off the bat so they don't stop you. This is because safe rooms and crescendo events require you to have everyone in the party there or everyone alive there. We started the run on the expert difficulty so that we can do team damage and kill our teammates fast. But then we immediately used a vote bind that we have set per the run to be able to automatically switch back to easy and back to expert whenever we feel like it. The next thing you'll notice is a movement tech known in source games as bunny hopping. This is what's allowing me to go so fast. In source games like Half-Life or Portal or Left 4 Dead, your movement speed is capped when you're holding W. This can be avoided entirely by just not pressing W. Strafing through the air with A and D and moving the mouse increases your velocity, and you can keep this velocity over time by jumping the same instant that you land. In other source games, this is much easier because you can find jump to scroll wheel. In Left 4 Dead, however, this does not help because the tick rate, or how often the game checks for information, is too low. This is because it's a multiplayer game by heart, and having a high tick rate in a multiplayer game is substantially more difficult on the servers. In Left 4 Dead as well, the friction on the ground is very high, so landing at all immediately loses all of your speed. This is why we have to jump with spacebar or any timed input. Every single jump that maintains its velocity is a tick perfect trick, which means you have 1/30th of a second to press jump at the right time. And this is every single time you land a successful jump. Left 4 Dead 2 is a game known for its replayability. This is because so much of the game is random. In speedruns, however, this can be very painful, as special infected spawns, common infected spawns, weapon spawns, and item spawns are all random, as well as sometimes even the pathing that you can take is random. Thankfully, though, this is not perfectly random. There is some patterns to how it works. For example, special infected always spawn on a timer. So if you're consistent with how fast you are, you'll get specials in the same spots. Like here. For instance, I knew that there's probably going to be special infected spawns when I left this area, so I shot the gas can through the wall, just in case I were to get grabbed. When you're grabbed by a special, there is nothing you can do to free yourself. You are just going to die, especially if you have no teammates. This is because the game is balanced around having multiplayer settings. At least having bots, if not human players to help you out if you're going to get grabbed. This is because chargers, jockeys, smokers, and arguably even tanks can all pin you down and have it so you literally can't do anything. In the solo speedrun, that makes this run very, very tense. At any moment, you can immediately be pounced, and there is nothing you can do. You've just lost a ton of time, and you are going to die. The exceptions to this, however, is if you get a tank to hit a special off of you, which is mostly done with jockeys, or what you saw there, where you set an enemy on fire or explode something as you get grabbed. This is super rare, however. It is not normal that you are able to get out of a grab like that. Safe rooms transitioning into the next sequence will actually end any action that you're currently starting. We often use this to finish our healing animations as soon as we start them. So instead of having to wait about 10 seconds for your heal to go through, you just start it immediately as you enter a safe room, and then when the door closes, it ends automatically. Tank spawns being random is one of the biggest inconveniences in the entire run. Thankfully, however, in this game, you can only ever get one tank on a map at a time, except for in finales. This is not true, however, in Left 4 Dead 1. In Left 4 Dead 1, you can get 2 tanks in the same map.
Anyone out there?
The position in which tanks spawn is not entirely random. Generally, they spawn in the same spots here or there on certain maps. And it seems that tanks and witches overlap each other in their spawns. So if you get a witch, it is unlikely that you'll get a tank in a similar or close spot. Here we're going to actually skip the entire crescendo event of the roller coaster by doing a little parkour. This version of this skip is only doable on the 2.00.00 version of the game, which is the original release and what we use to run solo. Different categories require different versions of the game, but solo runs are done generally on 2.00.00.
Hello?
This skips the entirety of the crescendo event, and you can actually jump right over this little gap here, making short work of this seemingly really long section.
That was close.
Up next, we have the Barns, which is notorious for being one of, if not the most reset-heavy sections of the entire game. It's just a culmination of all of the worst possible things about this game with its RNG. First off, the spot where I ran through just there is RNG. Sometimes there's a gate in the way, and if there is, you have to do what is known as a common jump over the gate, which loses a bit of time and is a bit random. We'll see a common jump in this section later on. Then, there is almost always a tank spawn. Where this tank spawns is random, and if it spawns near the end of the level, it is very hard to get away from. And fun fact, special infected, including tanks, can spawn inside the safe room, which in this particular section of Barns, if that happens, you're pretty much instantly dead because you're already running from a horde. Now that we started this crescendo that we cannot skip, we are going to do what's known as a common boost to try to get into a god spot where we can't die. We do this by jumping on top of a common's head while they're climbing, thus adding their climbing speed to our jumping speed, launching us in the air. In this particular scenario, the tank fell on the other side of the fence, but normally what you would hope would happen is that he would come to you. Because tanks have a thing going on where if they are behind a wall and can't aggro to you, and they don't know how to find you, eventually they'll just despawn and instantly die. This is not going to happen, however, because he can see me where he is. Having a boomer bottle for this section makes it infinitely easier, but after that, having a Molotov helps more than having a pipe bomb. And having nothing basically means you're not going to make it out of this one. Now, for the finale of Dark Carnival, we're going to illustrate why we do Dark Carnival first. A lot of people will ask me why we don't do Dead Center first. This is because we don't do the campaigns chronologically. We do them in any order that you want, whatever you think is fastest. But it is most certainly Dead Center or Dark Carnival that is fastest to do first. This is because there's a glitch that, by the way, still works on current patch to this day and with players, where if players are downed inside a certain spot in the safe room, a rather large spot, may I add, and you start the finale, they are actually kicked from the server. We do this in solo because we need at least one bot to be able to do some tricks, but we don't need to waste time killing all 3 of them every single map. So what we do is we fully kill one NPC and then down the others and kick them with this glitch. Once we have successfully kicked the bots from our server, we're going to run into what is known as a god spot. God spots are spots where the enemy AI doesn't know how to path to you. This is very useful because commons will just stand around, and special infecteds at times will get stuck on walls. During finales, where you are forced to kill hordes of enemies, this is really useful because if enemies are stuck behind a wall and they can't path to you, they'll eventually despawn. And in this particular situation, there are two spawn points really close to us where we can eliminate these enemies rather fast. Finales where you have to kill enemies, you actually have to kill the enemies. There's 2 waves of tanks and 2 waves of hordes. You have to kill all of the hordes and both tanks in order for the rescue to come save you. Here's an example of a tank despawning and dying because it doesn't know how to find us and it can't see us. There are circumstances where a tank will be able to see you just because of bad RNG and its spawn placement, and then you'll have to kill it manually. Now, you're not totally invincible in these god spots, as some special infecteds can still get you depending on where they spawn. For instance, smokers can spawn on the roof in front of you and get you, and sometimes hunters will break free. We use Molotovs to our advantage here to be able to kill the enemies that are spawning as soon as they spawn. This is because while they will despawn and that does count as a kill, it is faster to manually kill them if you have the ability to do so. Here the helicopter can go to either side. It's totally random which side goes on, but it doesn't actually save time on either side. Except for if you go for a glitch called the coin toss. If it lands on the side that it did for us, and you go there early and stand in the spot where it's going to be, the rescue frames for it loading into the next map actually are there at the beginning of the animation. This saves about 15 seconds, but if you miss it, then you have to run all the way back to the other side and hope you don't die.
Nick, what the hell? You shot the pilot.
Now that we have used a vote bind to get to the next map without having to go to the main menu, we only have 1 bot. This is because of that glitch we did in the last section. And as you can see, it saves a ton of time only having to kill 1 bot instead of 3. For this section, we are looking to do a glitch called Infinite Stumble. This is a glitch that is only available on the earliest patch, the 2.00.00, and on some console versions. Basically, what it is if you start stumbling and then you switch weapons, your stumble animation loops. And you could just keep looping the stumble animation. Now, the stumble animation, after it loops a couple times, you don't lose elevation from it. So you can use this to float across gaps where there is a hole in the middle. So what we're doing is looking for a propane tank to be able to set up this infinite stumble.
Time to kick some ass.
And now we fly across the gap, switching from our primary to our secondary weapon and back and forth. This is kind of precise because you can get stuck on some things, and if you do, you'll have to fall into the water and die. As well as if you get a tank here, it's almost impossible not to get hit out of the air with a rock. Almost every special can kill you while you're doing this. You can get charged out of the water while you're flying across, and can get smoked, and can get huntered. So it's very important that you make sure everything is clear before you try it. Another reason we play on the 2.00.00 patch is because it allows you to vote as many times as you want on a single map. In later patches of the game, you can only vote once per map. So you wouldn't be able to vote to expert and then back to easy every time, which would lose a lot of time when killing the bots, or make you play on expert or with bots.
To the drainage pipe. Okay, that was a little too close. Hello?
In Left 4 Dead 2, there are two maps that prominently feature water: Hard Rain and Swamp Fever. These maps are super brutal for the speedrun because adrenaline spawns are random. Adrenaline is important for water sections because water has a movement penalty of nearly half of your movement speed while walking in it. This is obviously very, very slow. On the upside, adrenaline actually increases your overall movement speed and removes the penalty while walking in water. So it's very important that you get lots of adrenaline spawns on maps with water. You can also negate this penalty by doing perfect bunny hops. However, it's extremely difficult to be able to do perfect bunny hops through long sections of water when you can't even see the ground. Being caught in sections of water with no adrenaline and lots of commons or even specials can lead to an instant death, as it can be very hard to recover.
The village is this way. Through this house. Elliot! Oh, that's about as close as I like to cut it. Where is everyone? Anyone out there?
Help, help!
We should look around and see if they left supplies.
This section, it's very important that we have boomer bile and an adrenaline if possible. This is because we're going to start a crescendo, but then have to run through a bunch of water. And getting stuck on commons while in water is an instant death, basically, because you will just not be able to get away from them. Here we're going to do a little shortcut and jump right onto the roof and skip going all the way around this section. From here, we're just going to beeline it right to the crescendo, going through the water. We could just bypass this crescendo altogether, except there's an invisible wall over this rock. Once we start the crescendo, however, this wall disappears and is no longer in the way, so we could just jump right over it. Now all we have to do is run into the safe room and we're at the finale. This is the only map in the whole game where I'm not going to pick up a melee weapon. Melee weapons aren't required, but they're a really good contingency item. Generally, melee weapons are useful to have because they kill commons super fast and can get you unstuck from areas. There are two types of melee weapons: blunt and sharp melee weapons.
Ooh, that was close.
Blunt melee weapons are just overall worse, and sharp melee weapons can do special things like decapitate enemies, and can even break smoker tongues when they're smoking at you.
Can you guys hear me?
Earlier I mentioned that having a bot can sometimes be very useful. This is a prime example of that. The reason I kept my pistol is because I don't want to do too much damage to Ellis. I want to down him without doing any additional damage. This is because we're going to use him to teleport into a god spot during this finale. In Left 4 Dead 2, if you get stuck and are physically incapable of moving for more than 6 to 10 seconds, you will immediately be teleported to any of your AI companions. And if you have no AI companions or any real-life companions, like I know I don't, then you will instantly die. This means that we have to run into the finale, start the horde, and then get stuck and teleport before Ellis dies. So doing the least amount of damage as possible is very important.
Weapons over here. Let's try. Can anyone hear me? We're at the plantation house.
Stuck to teleport back to Ellis, we're going to run underneath this staircase. And then while we're crouched, rapidly uncrouch and crouch again into the corner until we get our head stuck inside the wall. Now, as you can see on my inputs there, I literally can't move. And once I'm stuck for a certain amount of time, then I'll get teleported back to Ellis. This essentially functions as a god spot, but it's the entirety of the outside of the finale. Now all we do is we wait for the hordes and tanks to spawn and die, so we can get onto the boat with Virgil. Occasionally a special will be out here, so you need to be on the lookout. But nothing can spawn outside of that finale area. I'm going to use this spare time to look for an adrenaline and maybe a pipe bomb, just for the run on the way out.
Grabbing a shot.
This is the part of the run where we just wait and contemplate what the consequences are of killing our teammates every single round for every single run. Now that we hear the second tank's music, this is our cue to get ready. As soon as he dies, we're going to need to make a break for the door. We don't want to go too early because there are specials that are waiting for us and we don't want to die. We don't want to go too late, otherwise we'll lose some time.
Wow! Gates open!
Now we move on to Dead Center, my personal favorite map.
Where?
It has the most diversity and variance in level design in the whole game, in my opinion, and it also has some really cool tricks, especially this first map.
Hey, everybody grab something.
We're looking for a boomer bile and an adrenaline. In most maps, it's the case that you actually can't get a boomer bile on the second or third map. This is definitely the case here. So we want to get a boomer bile on the first map, otherwise we'll just be out of luck and not be able to get one later.
This elevator
It's
works.
very useful for the section where you get the cola to have a boomer bile. And we need to save an adrenaline for the finale of this map. It's actually worth it to save an adrenaline from the very first section all the way to the finale because it saves so much time. Here we need to make sure that we kill our AI companion all the way because we can't activate the elevator until they're dead. And then we get stuck inside the elevator mid-jump, which lets us stand on top of it and use the versus route to skip calling the horde in this section. As well as when you do this, sometimes the fire doesn't spawn. It actually does still hurt you though if you stand inside of it. It's just that the particles aren't there.
What happened to us? Reloading. All right, you guys ready?
Now that we're heading to the mall, it's basic business as usual. Just hopping our way downtown and looking for adrenaline. As well as trying to avoid witches and tanks wherever they should appear.
Grabbing a shot.
Witch spawns, like anything else in this game, are also random. Sometimes they'll spawn in spots where you absolutely have to kill them in order to proceed. Thankfully, on easy, it's really easy to crown them. You don't even have to shoot them in the head.
Weapons over here. Heads up, go. We can get up here. Hello? Would you look, Ellis?
Hello there. I barricaded myself for ample provision. But in my haste, I forgot coal. So here's my proposition. If you don't find me some coal beyond the food store,
This next section, we have to hail Coke Gaming and save
We'll go get you
these
your
colas
fix, but
from
you
the dreaded
better not
emptiness
try
of
to
the
weasel
store
out of this.
so that Whitaker will open the path for us. This is what we needed the boomer bile for. There being a ton of zombies here all coming in through the same hole you're trying to leave makes it very difficult to get through this section. And boomer biles are by far the best way to distract large groups of zombies for extended periods of time. There's actually many different ways to do this section. This is the safest way. You can climb and do a common boost to get up to the section that you need to almost immediately, but you have to wait for the boomer bile to end, so it's not much faster. Once we deliver the goods, we just gotta head into the mall after he yeets this car right out of the way.
I don't like the sound of that. What happened to us?
Now that we're finally in the mall, we can do some Black Friday shopping.
Hello?
We still really need to keep an adrenaline with us, so we only use that if we absolutely have to. However, we don't really have to have any particular throwables, so if we need to, we can use them. Next to Barnes, this is one of the most reset heavy sections of the entire game. Mostly because it has a very similar crescendo event to Barnes.
Escalator.
That being one where you start the horde and then you have to run through the spot where the horde comes out of in order to progress. In this section in particular, you're stuck in enclosed areas, so it's really easy for specials to kill you if you get stuck on all the commons. In this section in particular with the two escalators, it's actually very common for two of the same type of common or special infected to spawn in the same spot. So it's not uncommon that you might get two jockeys there, or two smokers, or two hunters. This is not totally unheard of in other sections of the game, but it is definitely more pronounced there. Going further into exactly how special spawns work, it's very similar to how Versus works. There can only be up to 5 special infected on the map at the same time, not including tanks and witches. And generally, there can never be more than one of the same type of special infected at the same time, except for these choice spots.
Holy shit, was that a
As well as they do spawn on a timer, but they will despawn and respawn in front of you as the same special infected if you get too far away. So at times, it is not worth it to run away from an enemy when you could kill them and hope that you don't get another charger or jockey.
Anyone out there? Ooh, that was close.
Now that we're in the finale and ready for Black Friday Part 2, we're actually going to do something very similar to what we did in the Swamp Fever finale, though not exactly the same. We do want Ellis to not die, but however, this is because we want the finale to not start. You can actually take the elevator down to the next floor on earlier patches before the horde starts, and since you have an AI in the safe room still, the horde won't start until you press a button to start it manually. This gives you a ton of time to go around and collect the gas cans and bring them to the car before you start the horde. Gas cans spawns are also random, of course, just like everything. This pattern I received here is not super bad, but also not the best. It probably loses me about 20 seconds over the best pattern. As well as this is also what we save the adrenaline for. The adrenaline is used to increase the speed at which you pour the gasoline. This speed increase is very substantial and can save up to 30 seconds, which is why it is so important to save the adrenaline for this section of the game. A bit of technique you'll see me doing here is I'm throwing the gas can and then meleeing it immediately after I throw it. And this lets me yeet the gas cans super far. Boomer Bile here is also very useful, but not required. I'm going to collect the gas cans, bring them all right to the car, and then start the horde and pour them all in with adrenaline active. This is the safest and fastest way to do this. No commons or specials will spawn while the horde is not started. It's basically a dead zone. However, specials that have already spawned from when you were not in the dead zone can come down and can kill you. This is why I grabbed an assault rifle instead of a shotgun.
Got it. Filling it up here.
Here, I accidentally choke and yeet this gas can a little too far and makes this section very, very scary. All is well though, as I only get the jockey spawn and none of the other specials that can really do too much harm. It's also important to note that I only vote just before I get to the end of the campaign. In order for the run to be valid, you have to hit the black screen and the auto splitter has to split for that section. But if you vote too late, the game actually doesn't let you vote after you hit that black screen. So you can't transition to the next map before that black screen, and if you try to do it too late, you'll be sent to the main menu. That doesn't invalidate your run, however, when you load into the next map, you'll have all the bots. Therefore, you'll lose a bunch of time by having to kill more bots for the rest of the run. Now we're in the Parish, which is easily the most RNG heavy and most difficult section of the entire game. This is because the way the level design in Parish works is it zigzags on itself. And because of this, that means specials and commons can climb over fences and travel much faster than you. So if you think you've outran something, chances are it's probably climbing up behind you and it's not far behind. However, some of these maps are extremely short and have lots of cool techniques in them. For instance, this next map, we're going to skip the entirety of the crescendo event by using a pipe bomb or a boomer bile to set up a common boost and just run out of the area.
Anyone out there?
For this section, we really need a pipe bomb or a boomer bile. Adrenaline is also very helpful, but not necessarily required. If we don't get a boomer bile or a pipe bomb here, the strat becomes infinitely more difficult, but not necessarily impossible. We also really want to save an adrenaline for the next map, but also want to use some here, because the adrenaline increased speed really helps for the setup of this trick. For the first part of this trip, I need to hit what is known as a crouch hop. A crouch hop is just like a B hop, except you're crouching. The timing is a little bit different and you gain a little tiny bit more height off of it. Crouch hops are required for some tricks where you just need a tiny bit more height to be able to get up on top of something. At the end of this running section, I'm going to need to do a crouch hop in at most 3 tries. Since I can't use my adrenaline for this section, I basically only have 1 try for it. If I mess this up, then I'll be stuck surrounded by commons and I'll have to run around after I kill them all. There was the crouch hop, and now I'm setting up for a common boost over the fence, skipping the maze section of this crescendo. Here comes the saucy part. You have to stand in this spot and set up a common boost off of enemies trying to kill your pipe bomb or your boomer bile. If you don't have a pipe bomb or a boomer bile, you have to run back and forth and try to bait enemies to stand there and then jump off of their heads, which is substantially more difficult than just doing it with a pipe bomb or a boomer bile, but sometimes you don't have the option.
That was close.
In my PB, I died there, being my only death in the whole run. So now this run is very good because I didn't die there. This run is actually my first deathless run of this game, as a deathless run is very hard to accomplish considering how much randomness there is, and how easy it is to die. In this next section, I also need to hit a crouch hop to get over and do a little shortcut. However, if I mess it up, it's not a huge deal, as I can get common boosted over. There is a section of this map where you have to run through a sewer, and this is what we're saving the adrenaline for. That water movement speed debuff is very punishing on this map in particular. As well as, this is one of the biggest examples of RNG pathing in the entire game.
That sounds like a witch. Kill your life.
Here I'm trying to attract commons so that I could set up for this common boost. This is one of the easiest common boosts in the entire game. And it jumps right into the water section, which also jumps right into the car lot. The car lot is one of the scariest sections in the entire game. This is because there are a ton of cars in this area and a lot of them have alarms. If you accidentally shoot or bump these cars, it spawns a horde. At the end of this hallway, there is a ladder, and if a horde spawns and they spawn in front of you, they can entirely block the ladder and you have to wait for the entire horde to die before you can progress through the section, essentially killing any good run. As well as if you get a tank to spawn in that section, which can happen, then he can hit any of the cars into you and instantly kill you. This graveyard section is the biggest section of RNG in this entire part of Parish. Essentially, there are about 5 different routes that the graves could spawn in. This is just an average route. Not super bad and not super good. The variance between the best and worst route is about 30 seconds. You saw there I dropped a boomer bile to pick up a pipe bomb, and that is because I need to set up for an infinite stumble in the next map. The propane tank spawns are random, so if I don't get one, I'll need something to set up my stun. I can do this with a pipe bomb, so it's important that I have the backup just in case I don't get the good RNG. We only do 2 infinite stumbles in the game, and this other one is technically optional. There's many different ways to do this one, but the infinite stumble is the easiest and most consistent.
Did we all make it? Oh, yes, we did.
This next section is aptly named Worst Split. This is because, for me personally, and for a lot of other runners, it is the single worst split in the entire game, or section, if you were. This is because it totally exemplifies that zigzag level design that I was talking about earlier. There's pretty much no warning for specials on this map, and it is very important that you get good RNG. As well as, it's almost guaranteed that you always get a tank spawn. And a few witches.
Holy shit!
As we climb this staircase, we're praying that we get propane tank spawns. It's not the end of the world if you don't, but you would have to do a common boost that is very jank and very difficult, or a series of crouch hops that are very difficult to pull off. As stated before, you are very vulnerable when doing infinite stumbles. Like for instance, if this tank were to hit me with this rock while I'm in the air above the gap, I will fall down. And this can lose an absolute ton of time, as well as hunters and smokers can pull you right out of the air. Thankfully this time I did not, and oh my gosh, did you see that charger? Thankfully this time I did not, and I was able to successfully get away.
Anyone out there?
And set up for another common boost, which is actually only one wall separated from where the tank was. If he wanted to, he could just climb right over the wall and be right next to me. In fact, he even yeets me with a rock from off screen. Thankfully though, we're heading into the end of Parish. Only one more map left. The finale, where you have to run to the end of a bridge. For most people, casually, this is one of the hardest finales in the whole game. In the speedrun though, it's actually significantly easier than most of the finales, because you're already used to running past everything.
I've been in the flesh. Hello?
Man, quit shooting me.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Making sure to stagger our adrenaline uses, we're basically just going to run to the end. It really is that simple. This is one of the sections in the game where you really just gotta keep it simple. You barely ever get any special spawns, except for the rare charger, and the tank is always in the same spot. So you don't really have to worry too much about what's going to happen, you just gotta keep going. As well as pray that there's some adrenaline along the way. The tank on this level will always spawn in the same general vicinity. And, for some special reason, if he hits you with a car while you're jumping only on this map, it does not instantly kill you. It's not shown off in this case, but if you're on this map and you jump and he hits a car into you, you just get hurt and then tossed into third person camera perspective. I have no idea why this happens, but It's very convenient because there's a lot of cars there and there's always a tank. Now we just gotta hop over a bit of a fence and go right to the helicopter and into the last campaign, Hard Rain. Hard Rain is very similar to Swamp Fever, as it's very important to get lots of adrenaline spawns. But Hard Rain has its own gimmick. Not only does it rain occasionally, which is also random, but you backtrack through the levels. So the adrenaline spawns that you get are twice as important. This must be the least safe room in the entire game. As soon as you walk out, you're attacked by hordes of zombies. In this map, we're looking to have a Boomer Bile as a backup for the strat on Sugar Mill, and Adrenaline to not pick up, but to know for on the way back. In particular, we're going to check the ambulance halfway through the map to see if there's Adrenaline on the way back. When you come back to this section later, most of the ground is covered in water. So we want to save the adrenaline for then, as we don't want to get stuck with the slow movement speed.
Where is everyone? Kill your wife. Uh-oh, it's raining. Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Here in the next safe room, we actually get a Boomer Bile and 2 Adrenaline. This is really good RNG. In particular, that makes 2 Adrenaline in the safe room and 1 in the ambulance on the way back. That's pretty much perfect. You can get 2 Adrenaline in the ambulance, but it's not too much of a big difference over having at least 1. Now this section we're looking for a propane tank to carry to the crescendo, which of course we're going to skip. We have a Boomer Bile as a backup, but doing a propane tank drop here will save about 10 to 15 seconds over doing the Boomer Bile strat. Watch as I take note of where adrenaline spawns are for the way back as I look back. I'm checking every possible spawning spot for propane tanks on my way up, and it seems like I'm going to have to do the Boomer Bile strat. And then I spot one right here, right at the top. Very convenient. Essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop my fall damage by having an explosion break my fall. I drop the propane tank down first, and then blow it up as I'm close to it, and this increases my upward velocity and decreases my falling damage.
Make it.
Now that we're on the run back, you can see lots more things are flooded. This is only going to get progressively worse on the way back to the safe room. This is exactly why we needed adrenaline spawns on the way back. The trick is to use them at the right times to be able to run across the biggest distances where you wouldn't be able to unless you had that adrenaline. But also not running out of adrenaline in sections where you would really need them. For instance, this is a great spot to use it because there is a vast section where you can run straight through instead of going all the way around. However, I only did this because I know there's another adrenaline in this level that I can pick up very easily.
Turn off that light quiet. Anyone out there? Grabbing a shot. Shit, I hear. Ooh, that was close. Where is everyone?
This second to last map is almost entirely covered in water, so it's important to be using adrenaline as much as possible. We have 3 in this instance, and I have to use one at the beginning in order to pick up the second one. This is not a very optimal place to use the adrenaline, but if I want to use the other one as well, then I have to use it here. There is also some routes and strats to use if you don't get any adrenaline or get smaller portions of adrenaline. For example, jumping on top of this car and then along the fence drastically decreases the amount of time that you're stuck inside water. Thankfully though, having 2 adrenaline near the end gives you just enough to be able to run all the way to the end and even hit some hops.
Oh, that's about as close as I like to cut it.
Now we head into the final map of the entire game. We've gone through all of the campaigns, and now we just have one finale left. This is just your traditional camp in the corner finale where you have to wait out the spawns. However, this one is very, very risky. As the god spot for this area, if you mess it up, you actually die, which would kill the entire run at this pace because it would take a lot of time to get back there. What we're going to do is actually hang off the edge near the boat dock and catch the edge on the way down so we can sit inside the water.
Get ready.
If you miss this, you instantly die, but it functions normally as a god spot. Commons and specials can't find you, except for the rare exceptions.
Where is everyone? Ellis!
This is just one version of the god spots on this map, and I am using the health kit to be able to look in third person, because I want to know if there's going to be a tank nearby. In this particular god spot, there is a couple things that can happen with tanks. Tanks will just spawn, not know where you are, and then die, which is fast, or Sometimes tanks will spawn so close to you that they can actually see you and try to walk towards you. Then one of two things happens. You either get pushed off the edge and die, or they jump off the edge and die. If they jump off, then it saves you actually a significant amount of time, maybe about 10 seconds. I also have a pipe bomb that I plan to use to distract commons right at the ends. Nearing the end, the boat's going to push me into the dock and then back up once it's popped all the way across.
Can you guys hear me?
Now that the rescue is coming, all we have to do is survive long enough to get onto the boat and then have the splitter tell us that it's over. However, there is generally one more tank that spawns, and I decide that I am going to throw this pipe bomb in order to distract some specials, or some commons. It actually gets stuck inside my face though, as I've never done this before, and it blows up, stunning me. But thankfully, it actually knocks the tank into the water, kills him, and stuns me towards the lake so I don't die. This run was saved entirely by luck right at the very end. And that is my first ever deathless speedrun of Left 4 Dead 2 in 54 minutes and 30 seconds, which is currently 8th place by 2 seconds.